Today I'm going to show you how I decorated this wedding cake. Come join me. So this cake is going to be a 3-tier wedding cake. The bottom is red velvet, the middle tier is strawberry, and the top is vanilla. Each are 3 layers. So to begin, a few days in advance, I started by using some modeling chocolate to make some sugar ruffles. So I used a cookie cutter and cut out these circles. Then I used a ball tool and kind of put it into the center of each one of those cut out circles, and I pinched them so that they made a sugar ruffle. So I put those aside and I allowed those to dry for several days before I was actually decorating this cake. And because it is modeling chocolate, it does harden and they become pretty stable to be able to be used to decorate on a cake. So this is an outside wedding, and so I wanted to make sure that whatever material I used, that it would be stable for an outside wedding that could reach 75 or so degrees in late May. So here I am just kind of softening up the modeling chocolate that I would be using to create the sugar ruffles. And once I have it pretty softened, I then roll it out using a rolling pin, and that is when I use the cookie cutter to cut out those circles. So ultimately, I used 5 bags of chocolate melters. So it did take a lot of these sugar ruffles to decorate this cake, which you'll see in a little bit what that does look like. Here I am actually rolling out that modeling chocolate. It's pretty thin. You want it to be pretty thin when you're doing this. So I'm just brushing a little bit of powdered sugar over top of this so it doesn't stick to my rolling pin. And then, as I showed a little bit ago, I'm just cutting out those circles. So once I pull those circles out of the whole piece of modeling chocolate, again using that ball tool to create those ruffles, and then pinching the bottom to create those ruffles. After I had enough of those, I just put those aside until the day before the wedding. Here's just another view of making those sugar ruffles. Here's rolling out that modeling chocolate, putting a little bit of powdered sugar, and then I'll be using those cookie cutters to cut out some of the circles that I need to make the ruffles. And using that ball tool again to create the ruffles that I need. After creating the sugar ruffles, I moved on to some of the artificial flowers, which was the request of the bride. And I just started to prepare my flowers. So I cut off the long stems to the flowers, and then used some flower tape to tape up those the stems, bunching together different types of flowers that I would be using on the cake. So I'm being careful to allow leaves to continue to show through. I did not want to squish them inside of the tape, so I'm pulling those leaves outside of the tape as I'm wrapping it down each of the stems and then up the stems, and then cutting it off at the top. So for those that don't know, the tape is very sticky, so it holds quite well. I'm just making sure to alternate so that I have both white and purple flowers on each one of these little bunches that I'm making for on the day of the wedding when I'm at the event and I'm putting the cake together. Here I am continuing to prepare the flowers. In this clip, I'm cutting off some of the tags that come on the flowers and cutting off additional stems. Once that was finished, I put those aside, and then here we are on the day before the wedding. So I am beginning with decorating each one of the tiers. This is the 3-layer tier that's going to go on the top. It's 4-inch 3-layer vanilla, and I'm really just stacking this cake. So I put some icing on the cake board to keep them still as I'm decorating, added my first layer, and then proceeded to stack and fill this cake. In between, after I have my initial crumb coat in, I do put this into the chiller so that it gets nice and solid, and then I pull it back out and I put my next coat on. So you'll see me kind of work through this entire cake before I move on to the next one. Although when I was actually doing this cake, I was kind of working in layers by coating of icing. So I did the first coating of this cake, then I did the first coating of the next, and then the third, and then I did the second coating of each one, really so that they all got done right around the same time. So again, here I am just stacking that top tier cake. Once I have some of the icing on for that first coating after the crumb coat, I just use my bench scraper to drag that icing around the sides to smooth it out some. Notice how I have quite a bit of extra icing up on the top of this cake, and I'm doing that so that once I have it done, I am able to use my my spatula to scrape it off. Here you go, to get those nice crisp edges as I just did. Here I am using some Viva paper towels which have no pattern on them to help with really smoothing out that icing on that top tier. Here I am beginning on the second tier. As I mentioned, this is a strawberry tier. It's a 3-layer 6-inch cake, and I'm just proceeding with stacking and filling this cake. After having that second tier done, I am moving on to doing the bottom tier, and this one is a 3-layer red velvet tier. So again, same as the first two, I'm just going to fill and stack this cake. So here I am adding additional icing to this bottom tier. I will note that while I do try to smooth over this icing, it does not need to be 100% smooth, because this is where we're going to be putting those sugar ruffles, and here I'm beginning. So you'll see I'm adding a little bit of buttercream icing to the end of each one of these, and then I'm just sticking them onto the cake. So once I get a little bit further along, I will start cutting the ends of these off and just kind of proceeding with just sticking these to the cake. So this is probably one of the longest parts of decorating this cake, but here we go. You can see how it looks when they're added together. So we're going to do that on the entire bottom of this cake. Just stay tuned while we work through that. You can see we're about halfway up this cake. We're just going to continue to work through adding these onto the entire cake. Well, the entire tier of this bottom tier. See, we're getting closer to being finished. So once we get to the top of the cake and we're at the edge, we're going to add about 1 or 2 rows on the top of the cake, and that is so that it is covered when we add our next tier to the top of this cake. We want to make sure that the whole cake looks like it's covered with these sugar ruffles on this bottom tier. So now they are filled, and we're putting in a support so that the next cake can sit on the top in that center section. This is what it looks like. And now here is what it looks like after I put it together at the location. And this is with me stacking the next 2 cakes on top and then adding those bunches of flowers onto the cake, which I don't show in the video. If you enjoyed watching this video, I encourage you to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel, and come back again to watch more content.